In this video, I want to show you how I lay out pieces of metal for cutting and drilling. By laying out, I mean measuring and marking, so I know where to cut and drill. Really, there are two things to keep in mind about this. As I said, this is for drilling and also for cutting. So if I wanted to drill a hole, say in this piece of metal, I could do it handheld, I could do it in a drill press, but chances are pretty good that the drill bit would wander a little bit before it started to bite into the metal. And that means a reduction in accuracy. So it's important to do what's called punching, sort of center punching, in order to create a little dimple. And this is the tool that I use. So there are some center punches that are just solid pieces of metal and they're sharp and you'd hit them with a hammer. But I prefer this kind because it's spring-loaded. You know, it moves back and forth. It's spring-loaded and it kind of has a little hammer already inside of it. So if I just pump it up and down several times, look closely, there's a little dimple there. And that is going to be enough to keep the drill bit centered right there as I start to drill. So it's a pretty important little tool. It's also great for woodworking too. Now, if I want to make a line, I'm going to have a couple of things. Say I wanted to have a straight line across this piece of metal. First of all, I'm going to need to have a reliable reference. And for that, I'm going to use some kind of a square. So this is called a combination square, and it can slide back and forth. So it's a 90-degree reference tool, but it also can function as a depth stop. Like for instance, if I wanted to draw a line, I don't know, let's just say 4 inches from the end of this piece, then I can set it to 4 inches, tighten this little screw here so now it's locked, and I can lay it on the end, and now I've got my 4-inch distance and I can slide it along. So if I want to make a line on this piece of metal, I can do it in one of two ways. I can scratch the line, so I could use this center punch or any other sort of sharp hardened steel tool like a scratch-all, and you lay your reference down and then some scratches like this and you've got quite a nice line. You can see very crisp too. Now, you don't always need to have a line that is square and crisp like this. Sometimes you just want to mark something for rough cutting. These little paint markers are great for stuff like that because metal is usually dark in color. So a regular pencil doesn't show up all that well. They call it a paint marker because it's actually filled with liquid paint. And if you shake it, you can kind of hear it. There's a little ball bearing in there and it helps to mix up the paint, just like in a can of spray paint. And the tip is spring-loaded, so you kind of push down like this. The paint then saturates the tip and you've got some paint that you can mark for a while. And you know, because sometimes you want to maybe mark things on a piece of metal as well as mark it for cutting. And because of the light color, this works, you know, really very well. Now there is another situation that I consider to be in the category of laying out work, and it has to do with transferring holes from one piece of metal to another. So that's what I want to show you next. Let's say for a moment that I wanted to create a hole in this piece of metal that's just the same distance from this end. It's actually not that easy to do if you think about it. I mean, I could go in with a pencil now, or maybe that white marker, and I could try and find the center just by eyeballing it. Or I could mark the edges of the hole, but that wouldn't show me exactly where the drill bit needs to go. For that, I need a hole in the center. And that's where a set of center finding punches come in. It's kind of like a bunch of drill bits, except they're not drill bits. They're punches, and they come in different sizes. The idea is that you choose one that's exactly the same diameter as the hole that you want to transfer. So this one here. And then you put the two together and then you use it with a hammer. So this punch fits this perfectly. So, and the spur is right in the middle of the punch. So in use, I can just line it up like this, put the punch in, and then, whoops, not supposed to fall down like that, but there. So now I've got a hole in exactly the center of this hole when the ends are lined up. I don't use these center finding punches too often, but they're not expensive, and when you do need them, there's really no substitute. So a couple more layout tools that are worth mentioning. One is this 6-inch ruler. It's graduated in some very fine increments. You know, on this side we're eighths. This is 1/16ths of an inch. We go over here to 30 seconds and even 64ths of an inch. The thing about metalworking is that many times you're only dealing with fairly small distances. I mean, sometimes you need a tape measure, but not all the time, and that's where a little ruler like this comes in. Very precise. I've had this, I bought this thing more than 30 years ago. Use it all the time. The lines are still as crisp as the day I got it. So, very useful little tool. And this is a machinist's square. They come in different sizes, but this is a nice size because it can fit in your pocket or a tool pouch. It's extremely accurate. It's accurate to within a couple of thousandths of an inch over the length of the blade. So that's how close to perfectly 90 degrees it is. And when you want to mark a 90-degree corner with great precision, this is the one to use. I actually use this as much to set up my woodworking tools, stationary woodworking tools like table saw, jointer, things like that, as I do for metalworking. But it is properly called a machinist's square, and it is a metalworking layout tool. Really, your interest in welding and your proficiency at welding does in large part come down to how you can fabricate metal and how well you can make the parts fit, how precisely you can work. So that's why I'm explaining all this, and certainly can recommend these little center finding punches.